Good morning, Westplex and the world, since we're on the World Wide Web. Steve Casper in the studio one other weekend for another great installment of All About Nutrition. Actually, What About Nutrition is the actual title. And I'm with David Gall. He is from O'Fallon Nutrition, and we've become very, very good friends, and he's helped me get a lot more healthy as well, and he can do the same for you. And we have a very special show lined up today with another superstar guest in the studios. But before we get to that, I want to tell you a few things. Welcome to What About Nutrition, the show that explores the link between nutrition and optimum health and asks the overlooked question, what about nutrition? Every day, there is more scientific evidence and research regarding the critical importance of nutrition for the promotion of optimum health. On What About Nutrition, this very program, today we'll focus in on dietary supplements, herbs, vitamins, and homeopathic remedies, among other things, what they are, what they do, and how to use them. We will also discuss diet, exercise, and other aspects of living a healthy lifestyle in the 21st century. We'll answer many of your questions you didn't even know you had. Your host again, David Gall, owner of O'Fallon Nutrition. David's with me here. He's a graduate of Washington University and Huntington College of Health Sciences Comprehensive Nutrition Program. And remember, always consult your health care practitioner before beginning any new supplements or other changes to your lifestyle. The purpose of the show is to inform, educate, and entertain, not to diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. Dave with me once again. And Dave, I'm so excited to be with you today, and we've got a guest in the studio. We've been working on putting the show together, and I'm just pumped.
Yeah, Steve, this is a really exciting day. You know, we've done some interviews lately, and I think those have been a lot of fun, and they've actually been phone interviews, and today we've got our guest right here in the studio with us. And
yep.
He's a great guest. We've got Phil Hess, who's one of my favorite company representatives that we work with. Phil is unique. So Phil works for a company called New Chapter, which is one of the leaders in herbal nutrition and whole food nutritional supplements, I would say. And Phil has a unique background. He's a former pharmaceutical rep. He's actually worked for a number of pharmaceutical companies, and for a long time, that was Phil's career. And a few years ago, he came over to the Rebels with us over here on the other side of things and became a representative for New Chapter. But what I really like about Phil is that he's always based his information in science. He really has learned how to be technically rigorous as a result of his earlier career in the pharmaceutical side of things. And Phil's familiar with all sides of the alternative medicine, pharmaceutical, kind of government interaction between all of these entities. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you today here, Phil. Welcome to our show, What About Nutrition?
Hey, Dave. What an introduction. Very, very happy to be here. Well, my experience is quite unique in the industry, I guess. I do have a little bit of background. I worked 10 years in the pharma industry selling in the biotech industry as well, selling cancer drugs and things like that. I've come to this industry actually very skeptical about the industry. But in the last several years, you know, my eyes have been opened, and I recognize now that a lot of these companies in our industry are very clinically oriented. We do put out really good products that are clinically validated, and they offer products that are unique, and they address many different types of disease states without putting people at risk for side effects. So I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm really happy to talk about our topic today, which is I'm very, very excited about, because today we're going to try to dispel some of the myth about heart attack, stroke, and how the role of cholesterol and inflammation in heart disease.
Yeah, so Phil, so the basic, gist of our program today, folks, is we're going to try to discuss the links between inflammation and cardiovascular disease, and we're going to try to address this concept that's out there that cholesterol is the single greatest contributor to heart disease, and that cholesterol is the only evil and there's nothing good about it, and that things are as simple as when you eat cholesterol, it clogs your arteries, and you have to reverse that. And of course, as you're familiar with, Phil, there's a lot more than meets the eye regarding that subject. And so I'm just going to kind of jump into it a little bit, Phil. So, a lot of folks would say, these days there's a greater appreciation in our understanding of the inflammation response. And many leading medical scientists are starting to believe that many chronic illnesses have their foundation in chronic inflammation. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, Dave, I can expand on it. And there are two types of inflammation, as you know. You have your acute inflammation that's healing. You know that when you sprain an ankle, you get swelling, redness,
Sure.
and pain.
Yeah.
That's acute. It's short-lived, and it heals.
Right.
The other type of inflammation is called chronic inflammation, and that's the chronic inflammation is what causes problems and causes health issues down the road.
So that's the inflammation that you don't necessarily feel, or what sometimes people refer to as silent inflammation?
Yes, silent inflammation is going to be the subject we're talking about at great length today, because it's been shown that silent inflammation, the inflammation that we don't know about, that's going on in our bodies, that is caused by a number of different factors, our increased intake of dietary fats and things like that, lead to a range of conditions such as heart attack, stroke, various cancers, dementia, things like lupus, autoimmune diseases, etc. So the control of chronic inflammation is key in overall long-term good health.
Okay, well, that makes perfect sense. We've done a lot of shows on, for example, the balance of fats that come into people's diets, and we've discussed how certain fats, such as the high omega-6 fats that you'll find in certain animal fats, as well as things like vegetable oil, soybean oil, canola oil, can be inflammatory. And we've also discussed on the show how sugar in the diet can actually increase inflammation as well. And so, Phil, your company specializes in addressing inflammation from the use of therapeutic herbs that are known to reduce inflammation, such as turmeric and others. And also, your company does some great work with fish oil. And we'll come back to that in part 2. But I'd like to really explore this link between inflammation and heart disease. So let's talk about how plaque develops in the arteries. And Phil, a lot of folks are under the impression that, like, when they eat a cheeseburger, that the cholesterol in that cheeseburger is going and filling their arteries up like cement and blocking their arteries. Is it really that simple?
No, not at all. But it's a thing that people can understand and get their arms around. But it's not even close to the facts. Let's just talk about some heart disease facts before we roll into that, Dave. Number one, it's the leading cause of death in the United States. You've got 1.5 million heart attacks occurring in the United States each year, and roughly 500,000 people die from heart attacks a year.
Wow.
And every 36 seconds, someone dies from a heart attack. Okay? And furthermore, I don't know if a lot of people understand this, but more than half the heart attacks that occur in people with normal cholesterol.
Oh, that's a huge point. I'm sorry to interrupt you for a moment, Phil, but I want to make that point again.
Wow.
Yeah, did you hear that, Steve?
Yeah. Well, and I know where this is kind of leading, but I also have to ask right now how much just smoking has to do with that. But we'll talk about that later.
Okay, yeah, sure. We can talk a little bit more about smoking, and it does play a role in heart attack.
So that's just, it's another big contributor to increases in inflammation.
Right.
I think is part of the gist of it. And
but what was that statistic again? Over half are not even because of cholesterol. Is that what you said?
That's very true.
Wow.
Okay.
yeah, so that's based on over half of the folks who have heart attacks. If you look at their cholesterol score,
Normal.
and over half of them, it's normal or low.
Correct.
Wow.
That comes from the American Heart Association.
Well,
That's shocking, and you just don't hear about that out in public. Really.
So that's totally true. And so that begs the question, geez, I wonder if there's another marker that we could look at that is consistently high among almost everybody that has heart attacks.
And there is. And let me before we get into that, let me just add. You asked earlier about the plaque development. And
Right.
you stated that most of us, and I'm not different than anyone else, I used to think the same. I used to think that the more hamburgers and French fries I ate, the more the cholesterol, sort of clogged up my artery, built on top, cholesterol built on top of cholesterol, and over time the blood vessel wall will get narrower and narrower, and eventually it would eventually stop the flow of blood and cause an infarction or a heart attack. That's not the case at all. To be honest with you, I didn't even realize that until just recently. It turns out that the plaque actually develops inside the blood vessel wall. It's not developing outside the blood vessel wall.
Okay.
You've got that. And furthermore, it's not just cholesterol that's building up inside the blood vessel wall. It's actually white blood cells, monocytes, macrophages. So you've got inflammation occurring inside the blood vessel wall, okay? And over time, that cholesterol, that those white blood cells build up and up, along with oxidized cholesterol. You start building it up inside the wall. The blood vessel wall starts to wall it off and tries to hide it and contain it.
So you've got a swelling of these white blood cells and oxidized cholesterol inside of the artery.
That's right, correct. Inside the arteries. And what's inside the arteries isn't hard at all. It's not a hard piece of fat. It's more like a boil, if you will, inside the blood vessel wall. And as time goes on, your body's the blood vessel wall walls that off and tries to contain it. But chronic inflammation from your diet and other things constantly chip away at that protective wall. Over time, chronic inflammation with the production of something called matrix metalloproteinase, the same enzyme that breaks cartilage down, also breaks down that protective cap that's where the plaque is developing.
So we're picturing this boil on the lining of the arterial wall that's filled with white blood cells and oxidized cholesterol, and this enzyme you just mentioned that's present in the body eventually breaks down the wall of this boil.
Yes.
And then it ruptures?
Exactly, David. Precisely. It ruptures. It ruptures into the blood vessel wall. Thrombocytes clot it. Now it forms a clot. Then if the clot's not large enough, you still get blood flow around it. But you're at very high risk because you have a clot on the inside of your blood vessel. The clot can actually cause a heart attack there and then, but sometimes the clot is very small, so his blood will still flow. If the clot is small, and then you have pressure from either physical stress or mental stress, that clot can break off, flow downstream, and cause you to stroke out or have a heart attack.
Oh my gosh, this is insane. So this is perfect timing too. We're almost here at the end of our first segment, and what we've done is we've just established how arterial plaque actually builds up in the artery wall and some of its links to inflammation, what it's composed of, which is these white blood cells and oxidized cholesterol, and then it can rupture, releasing a clot. If the clot breaks off and then it lodges in a brain blood vessel or in the heart, you have a stroke or a heart attack. And when we come back in part 2, we're going to discuss what we can do about that.
And we will be right back. You're listening to All About Nutrition, What About Nutrition, on Westplex Radio on this weekend. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be right back. Just give us a couple minutes.